Earth's Emergence, Transcendence, Prologue. Transcendent. Far across the universe, an ancient star-faring civilization has spread to nearly every habitable world in their galaxy. The Olomnri are characterized by their bronze skin, with glowing, iridescent lines of glittering freckles. They are tall and beautiful, with bright golden eyes, silky glimmering hair, and an elegant radiance resonating as much from their heightened consciousness as from their physical appearance. They live in a galaxy they call Kronlia, a spiral of stars where hundreds of millions of worlds host trillions of these heightened beings. The Olomnri live lives not limited to just decades. They live several thousand years before consciously ascending from one life to the next. When one physical life ends, the spiritual consciousness drifts and joins as the spark of a new Olomnri child, and by this process, the Olomnri have carried forward their memories, skills, and experiences from their previous lives. Living this way, they have created a civilization with little fear of disease or violent death, a galactic utopia. Before they found this abundance, before this enlightenment became their way of life, constant war was the only mindset. Hostility, domination, greed, and the need to rule over others drove them to conflict that nearly brought their own extinction. In the dark times, Olomnri killed one another for sport, greed, and pride. In peaceful regions, they held death tournaments for the pleasure of the slaughter. Hundreds of combatants entered the battlegrounds of the arenas, and hundreds fell to their opponents' wickedness. Every tribe broadcast every tournament to their people. Those who went to kill and die went to prove their death-dealing skills to strike fear into all who might think of attacking their own tribes. Fanatical ideologies upheld by tribal leaders perpetually fueled the people's hate. The strongest in every tribe, those most driven by manic desires to slaughter their enemies, always gained and held power over the masses, and the cycle went on generation after generation. After years and years of endless war, they burned and scoured the surface of their world. Every battle, every explosion, they tore the life from it, and it teetered on the edge of being able to sustain life at all. Despite it all, the madness only escalated. The fear and hate that held them in the perpetually destructive cycle offered no relief. It only drove them to find more effective ways of killing one another. And then the shift came. Liginia and her family sat at their dinner table, sharing a typical meal. With his mouth half full, "It is incredible how cunning and courageous the northern tribes are this year," her father enthusiastically commented. His words made her heart sink. It was the typical topic of conversation, and her mother adamantly picked it up. "Yet, the way they sneak and conspire, they are repulsive. I prefer the Middle Landers. They are fierce and courageous. Their leader is a master slayer," she pointedly replied, making more assertions on who would gain the most glory in the next tournaments. Liginia felt so sad. She wished for it all to be different, and silently thought of what it would be like if this were a more peaceful world. She looked up from her food and blurted it out. If only knowledge and enlightenment were held as highly as the killing of our own," she said softly, unable to make eye contact with either of her parents as she did. The awkward silence was broken only by the announcer on their viewer, and she saw her mother's eyes widen with excitement. Lignia's eyes went back to her food, and a cold tear dropped from her nose. Time seemed to slow. Without warning, a thermonuclear weapon detonated in the sky over her city. Hundreds of buildings crumbled, and Liginia's was among them. Where once a city stood, a ruined landscape of rubble, fire, and smoke now smoldered. When she awoke, she found herself trapped in the wreckage, There was no sign or any sounds of the living, and she knew her parents were lost. Alone and mortally injured, she understood her fate and accepted it, almost relieved to be free of all the killing. She drifted in and out of consciousness and suffered dreadfully. She could hardly breathe, the pressure on her body allowing only quick, short breaths. But somehow, she was still alive. She thought of how much she loved to sing and wished she could. A melody started in her mind, and with it came a sense of calm. With nothing left, she embraced it, and it became her last song of this life. Her beautiful voice would have been a comfort in this tomb, but she did not have the strength. She was pinned by a beam that somehow stopped just short of allowing her a quick death. She wished it had been quick and painless. What she felt now was far too dreadful. The only sound she could make was a faint whimper, and even that brought on shooting pain up from her crushed lower half. Yet she stayed conscious, and the voice of her mind rhythmically chanted on. She focused and let it flow. It was her story, her dream of how it could have been, the way she wished life for the Olomnri to be, if only they could see that tomorrow is what you choose. So forgive and let go, let all Olomnri grow, and, from this day forever, live free. It was a song born of hope, a dream for her people to awaken from a nightmare and find themselves, a song filled with passion for unity and peace, a song sung by one who has seen through the lies, hate, and fears ruling their lives. It was fluid, rhythmic, a melody of all she believed her people could be. It blocked the pain, and soon it was an extension of her own life's energy. As she drifted in and out of consciousness, it stayed with her. And then, even as she passed beyond the physical realm, she held on to it and kept the song alive. She did not know it, but her inner voice telepathically reached out to every Olomnri on the planet. It filled their minds and cleared the fog of rage that had blinded them from seeing the truth of what they did. The awakening spark turned to a flame. This chance connection with their hidden telepathic ability, an ability all Olomnri inherently possess, saved them. Soldiers, commanders, and leaders of entire regions all stopped in mid-motion and mid-sentence. Missile launch countdowns halted in their final beats, and their extinction was averted. Tears fell from their eyes as they looked to their brothers and sisters standing on fields littered in bodies, corpses torn limb from limb, where, until now, generations of ceaseless battles waged. Many dropped to their knees, with their heads in their hands. The reality of what had been and what was done now so clear in their minds. Some stood in disbelief, still covered in the gore of those lying at their feet, and as the clarity of the brutality and senseless carnage settled into every one of their minds, a feeling of great sadness, guilt, and humility washed over them. The life energy of Lignia sang of peace while confronting the pain locked deep in their hearts. Take hold of the suffering and fear from generations past and cast it away. She repeated it, rhythmically flowing with it. Forgiveness, and for the minds of all living, this is a promise of new peaceful beginnings. Her out-of-body flow gained strength, carrying on for what seemed like days, somehow, echoing in their minds, until it faded away, and with a sense of fulfillment, she let go of the link to the physical realm and drifted away. As a conscious signature of energy with total special awareness, a truly sentient spiritual being. A unified Olomnri emerged from the rubble of their past, and with a clear view of how close they had come to causing their own extinction, they stepped into their own future with the purpose to never fall back into the trap of fear and hate. Somehow, Many cycles of the stars later, her name emerged in their minds, the name akin to the awakening of their people, and to speak it was to remind anyone of their solemn vow to never return to such ways. Lignia. Tranquility became the new reality. The Olomnri searched for knowledge, strove for peace, and found enlightenment. 3 generations passed before the technology to leave their still crippled world emerged, and as it did, they renamed their mother planet to honor the voice that saved them all. Lignia. An age of insightful reflection and ingenious discoveries arose. They evolved, extending their lives beyond centuries. Incapable of hostility or irrationality, their civilization spread like wildfire. They spread to hundreds of millions of planets, terraforming and building beautiful cities, and their numbers exponentially grew. They cultivated and discovered new knowledge hidden behind the gates of their now conquered violent madness, and by this they found spiritual immortality. For more than 1,000,000 years, they spread throughout their galaxy, growing to hundreds of billions and then trillions. The level of civilization they were creating was perfection on every level, and then one day, beyond the outer edges of their galaxy, a tear in the fabric between the realm of the living and the realm of all that is darkness was forced open by a powerful Dracon, with a swarm of world-eating creatures hungry for destruction. And when this spirit of darkness sensed the abundance of life blossoming in the galaxy of the Olomnri, the evil one turned its attention with a keen desire to consume, and guided the horde of monstrous creatures towards their next conquest. They arrived with no warning. Hundreds of moon-sized creatures with black carbon shells, tentacles, and crab-like legs flashed into a solar system on the outskirts of the Olomnri galaxy. The dark swarm of creatures was sudden, ruthless, and devastating. They shifted through ripples of space-time, crossing distances faster than light. When they arrived in the inner zone of the first solar system, images of the enormous monsters streamed live to every planet in the galaxy. Pictures and videos flooded social networks on a galactic scale, and no one had an answer for what they should do. When it started, trillions of Olomnri across the starscape of Kronlia watched in real time as the creatures unleashed their destructive power on their people's world. A few interstellar relays survived the initial attack, providing various angles, but they did not last, and soon real-time communications were lost. After that, only thoughts could be felt and heard by those telepathically connected to the few Olomnri still left alive. Then, with a chilling finality, every connection was gone, leaving only memories of thoughts describing how their planet was being ripped apart, feelings of how there was no hope, thoughts of despair, fear, and panic, and lastly, sudden and chilling silence. Normally, when one of the Olomnri died, the energy of that life was felt ascending beyond the physical realm before returning to a new birth. In their culture, death was peaceful and spiritually enlightened, and in many cases, when Olomnri passed away, they drifted and talked transpathically with friends and family before shifting to the next life. This time, though, it was nothing like that. There were no voices from the beyond, no feelings of peace and transference, just a cold, cold silence. An entire galactic civilization was left in horror and disbelief, and the feelings took root, and with them came fear and chaos. The sense of loss saturated the plane of telepathic thought, and everyone felt the underlying metallic taste, resonant and unshakable. Billions of their kind were gone forever. It was a never-ending trickle, a sadness felt in the hearts of all, transforming into waves carrying storms of confusion and outrage, where many of them lost themselves to panic and despair. The fear amplified when the star in the devastated system disappeared from the galactic map. No trivial thing. At the beginning of their technological revolution, their scientists discovered a sub-dimensional filament that allowed for a real-time view of everything in their galaxy. It was what enabled them to travel and communicate across the vastness of space instantaneously. This map tapped into that window, and when a star went missing from that map, it meant that that star, in fact, was gone. The galactic maps, central pillars in their society, were always displayed as large three-dimensional projections in every city center. And so, it did not take long for every population to be aware of the strange occurrence. Now, where that star once was, something new was forming. An inky cloud of darkness, a darkness seeming to spread slowly throughout that system. And as they watched it happen, a feeling of doom gripped their hearts. Some hoped for the best. Some even tried to deny it. But deep down, they felt the truth. Their long-cultivated ways of life were now threatened by a force none believed could be defeated. Fear of where the swarms of creatures would appear next broiled in the telepathic networks of their minds. Viral ideas jumped between individual minds as hysteria. Everyone waited, wondering, speculating, and dreading the idea that they could be next. 3 standard solar cycles passed before another system raised the alarm. Ready this time, video broadcasters put out distress calls, streaming images, and videos of the creatures. Every world in the galaxy was watching their skies in fear, and this world captured the bursts of dark swirls rippling beyond their outer atmosphere, as thousands of the creatures appeared around their planet. Tendrils of plasma lashed out from the dark, glossy creatures as they targeted and destroyed every defensive installation and satellite. In this case, this star system had defenses. It was routine for them to eliminate asteroids heading for their worlds. With these weapons, they targeted the creatures and gave them everything they had. Their very best proved to be of no consequence. Direct impacts showed little to no effect. As suddenly and as brutally as before, every mind-to-mind connection was cruelly cut off, and a new silence echoed in their minds. Billions more were gone forever. The swarm seemed driven by an insatiable hunger. They moved from system to system, leaving only darkness in their wake. Somehow, it seemed the monstrous creatures consumed even the stars themselves. Many Olomnri got organized and sent probes into systems where the creatures had destroyed everything. But they never lasted long. Glimpses of the monsters and their faint iridescent tentacles were captured, along with vast storms of energy that always ended the video feeds before they ever got too far. Unsure of their enemy's true face or its reasons for coming to their corner of the universe, the Olomnri named this swarm of destruction by the same name given to the most evil of their own kind. From the days of killing, from the days of their darkest hours, from before the Great Shift, they called them Sethree, the gods of death. Timiat. In a nearby star system, evacuations were underway. But for Timiat, he knew what was coming and wanted to see it for himself. They were up there, and the attack on the outer worlds in this system had already started. He knew deep down that it would not be long, and to join the bustle and panic would only link him to those with no hope. He did not believe Olomnri were not spiritually ascending beyond the destruction of their worlds, and he would see it through in order to know the truth. He was not like most of his people. He was not afraid of death or this evil. His mind was as clear and aware as anyone, and there was a feeling within him that this death was the only way to truly survive. In his heart, hope was alive. The pillars in the hall shook as thundering energy crashed down from beyond the sky. Rippling waves of crackling plasma rolled across the landscape, and many buildings toppled. The air filled with shattering glass and chunks of concrete. Clouds of sand filled the air, and bursts of fire shot up into the sky. Tendrils of plasma shrieked down from beyond the atmosphere, their impacts ripping whole sections of smoldering planet crust up into space, to where waiting creatures rushed in to devour every last bit. On the horizon, Timiat watched flashing tendrils of plasma crash down towards his planet's surface. He made out silhouettes of the creatures beyond the atmosphere and considered how they seemed even larger than what he remembered in the footage of the last solar system's destruction. Death is getting closer, he thought, the reality of it weighing heavily on his heart and thick in his mind. But his choice was already made. It was too late, and he would not waver. Looking up into the sky, he cursed the attacking horde. There were thousands of them up there, and he knew there was no place to hide, nothing he could do but prepare for the end. And with that purpose, he found inner peace. He stood on the balcony of a building high up on a ridge and watched it all unfold in front of him. On an average night, a glimmering coastal city with a pink sandy coastline would have led his eye to the horizon. High up in the clear night sky, a majestic purple world and its 3 moons would be cresting the horizon in a fantastic cosmic display. It was a sight he longed to see just one last time. He thought of the festivals, the gatherings, the warm, humid nights, and the long tropical days of this season. A pang of regret wrung in his mind as he recalled the fond memories that he would never get to experience again. The games, he thought, the final match will never be played. He cursed. Oh, what a rivalry they had! It would have been the greatest match. He whispered sadly, "It will never be played." Usually, the Olomnri of this world would have spent their time at ease, relaxing, celebrating, and taking in the height of the warm summer season. In place of what should have been, a nightmarish and horrific scene played out in front of him. In the sky, half visible through the smoke and billowing fire, he watched that beautiful purple planet and its moons shatter under an onslaught he could hardly believe. A tear dropped from his eye as he thought of all the dead and dying, and the thought of it sent a chill through his inner being. They were there, huge shapes among the destruction, glossy moon-sized beasts with tentacles reaching out hundreds of miles, crackling shards of galactic lightning arching across them, and he strained to understand. Why was this happening to his people? From where he stood, he could just make out a row of thorn-covered legs writhing as one of the monsters came over the horizon in front of him. He calmly watched, contemplating what was to come. His eyes went to a line of buildings off in the distance. The planet's crust fractured, and the buildings crumbled to the ground. His senses escalated as adrenaline rushed through him. The ground shook from continent-shattering impacts, and the skin on his arms crawled with the feeling, the knowing sense that his own death was imminent. On the horizon, the crust of his planet seemed to curl up into the air, and beyond that, fire rose into the sky. He nearly choked on his own breath. As if the destruction in front of him was not enough, a panicked outcry from the minds of everyone on this world battered at his subconscious. Again. Boom! Thunder from an impossibly ferocious storm. His eyes caught the arch of plasma rushing down from the sky, and he tracked it. The impact sent a shock wave rippling over the landscape, collapsing every structure inside a 50-kilometer radius, and the closeness of it got to him. His heart skipped hard, and panic fought to take him over. There was no hope, He knew it wouldn't be long now. Again, another strike ripped into the surface of his planet, and closer buildings crumbled. Fire slashed the air, thunder smashed the sky, and another shockwave rushed past his perch. His shaking got worse, and with it, a fury and a fear to which he could so quickly lose himself crept in. But he could not. He knew he had to stay clear and calm if he was to ascend consciously to the next life in order to discover what was driving this destruction of so much life. Each plasma impact slashed canyons into the planet's crust. He admired the sheer power of the enemy, seeing entire mountains ripped up from the surface of his world. A new feeling washed over him, a sense linked to the spiritual plane. It was death on a planetary scale. It came as a deep, sick feeling. A chill ran through him. Then something beyond pulled at his mind. And he knew. This was the force behind all that was happening. And after a moment of getting a taste of it, he pushed it away. More plasma from the creatures came crashing down through the atmosphere just off the coastline, their impacts igniting the sea. A wall of fire rose up and washed over the mainland. Ionization, he thought. His planet's crust was beginning to break apart. It was falling away, crumbling into space. Yet somehow, his hilltop vantage was still on the cusp of the destruction. Thick, acrid heat washed over his face, and he reached out with his mind, patiently waiting for the end to this long yet shorter than expected cycle of life to come. The ground shook more violently, this time nearly knocking him from his feet. And as death came ever closer, in his mind, everything seemed to slow. He noticed the creature's insatiable appetite for the raw materials of his world and wondered what, if anything, was driving them beyond just their instinctive hunger. He knew that his people were trying to make contact in every way possible, yet no reply ever came. The creatures just kept moving forward, effortlessly sweeping all resistance aside. He thought of his family and reached out with his mind. Fortunately, he considered, they were all far from this condemned world. Farina, his fifth-born daughter, was the first to link with his mind. She felt him, and he felt her, their mind-to-mind connection spanning countless light years. Yet she felt so close. They understood that the rest of the family would be safe for long after today. He felt his children, his closest friends, and lastly, with a great wave of strength, his wife, who was visiting her mother thousands of light years away. They were all there, linked in a cloud of telepathic thought, words, and emotions. Confusion and fear were at the forefront of their initial reaction. "I will see you all in my next life, just as it has always been for generations, and always will be," he reassured them, and for a moment, their fears lifted. His family would live on, safe, on far-off planets and moons. They would live for many turns of their stars and do many things with their lives. With that thought, a mutual realization formed. This unstoppable evil, would it spread to every corner of their galaxy? Were they all doomed in the end? What if this evil could never be stopped? And with it, a rush of cold fear swept through their connection. He felt their panic enter his mind in a wave of turbulent emotion. He knew there was no other choice, and calmly issued his farewell before mentally shutting them out. He returned to the present moment. In front of him, the wall of fire was only seconds away. He had to fight the fear with all his strength. With the end approaching, he searched his emotions and thoughts, casting away all doubt and preparing himself to transition beyond the physical world of this lifetime. Once again, reaching out with his mind, he sent a projection of hope. He dreamed that someone, one day, would stop this inexorable plague now sweeping across the galaxy. He put a seed of purpose out into the universe, wishing that somehow this evil would be stopped before every Olomnri was gone. And as the thought formed, the oncoming wall of fire hit him. His tears dried instantly, engulfed in flame, vaporized. Separated from his physical form, his awareness drifted, rising away from the swirling flames and carnage bellow. He pulled feelings of tranquility and peace around him and embraced the transition. Long years of training and experience in the ethereal mind prepared Olomnri for this moment, one he had experienced many times. Ascending, he felt a strange imbalance. A sharp pounding frequency lashed through the plane of souls. It was harsh, and it was powerful. And as he gained more clarity, he saw uncountable wisps, spiritual forms like him, all drifting in this state of in-between. But there was something else, a tug in the weave. It pulled at his being. It was a disturbance unlike anything he had ever encountered or heard of, and he felt that this could be a clue to what was behind all of this. He saw a dark ripple go through the billions of wisps around him, and then they were gone. How could they be gone? The sharp frequency was unnatural. It was pulling at him, ripping at his consciousness, and then he understood. It was trying to take him. He sensed the others all around, uncountable souls rising, drifting, millions of Olomnri who moments earlier were connected to the physical realm as living beings. They were being thrashed by a vast evil, a power encompassing everything. The feeling went through him again, and then the shrieking of dying souls blanketed his mind. He saw the ripple. Life energies in the form of spiritual wisps vanished, and then, even closer, a strange, vaporous darkness took them. Whatever it was, it searched for any fear or weakness, and when it found it, it feasted on them. He fought with everything he had, straining to block it out, but it infiltrated his thoughts, and he quickly lost control. Desperately, he reached out with his mind, and a moment of clarity returned. Dark tendrils latched onto his being, and he fought it. He could see it. He saw the darkness consuming them, devouring the weakened souls of his people. Not only were the Sethree creatures feeding on the minerals of the planets they destroyed, but a force beyond the physical plane was consuming the life energy of all who lived there. And with that realization, he knew his only hope was to get escape. What kind of devils feed on souls? He questioned, fighting even harder to get past the next wave of screams pounding in his mind. He knew he had to regain his strength, and knew he had to find a way to evade this evil. He called on the knowledge of all his lifetimes, and the teachings of a great philosopher, a master of transcendence and ascension, came to him. He recalled learning that, in theory, a fully conscious being was not restricted by space or time, but only by the power of the mind. He learned that when in a purely spiritual form, one cannot cause an effect on the physical universe. But at the same time, while existing as a fully conscious spiritual being, one could move across the vast distances of the physical universe with no relation to time. Not knowing precisely, he focused his last ounce of strength. Instinctively, he followed a feeling that rose from within him, and, in a snap, he winked his ethereal body away from what would have been the end of his spiritual existence. He shifted his position from above his decimated world to a place as far as he could reach, and then farther. Moving his position past the edge of the galaxy, past everything he had ever known, beyond space itself. And when he stopped, he looked back at the entire universe. Every galaxy, every solar system, every quasar and black hole, all just a cluster of bright and dark glittering crystals in his spiritual eye. The decimation of his homeworld was now an undetectable speck in the vastness of it all. There was no frequency, but his own relief coursed through his consciousness. He felt safe. He drifted, letting his instincts guide him on the currents of attraction. Something called to him, something fainter than a cosmic whisper, a feeling of hope, and he could not avoid moving towards it. When he had it clearly in his mind, he reached across space, his consciousness shifting across billions of light-years in less than a moment of his own relative time. It called to him, the faint solar system on the outskirts of a glittering galaxy. There was just one water world, and on it he saw an adolescent form of sentient life. He reached out with his mind once more, this time with greater focus. What a beauty! Remote and young, he considered and got closer. It was a place he would want to spend time investigating, and then, in a rushing motion of space and time, everything went dark.